What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to my Get Out series. And first off, congrats on reaching Diamond. Now, from this chart, you can see as of April 2025, this is the current standing of all the players in the game. So if you've reached Diamond, you're doing pretty well. But pretty well isn't good enough, so let's go over what you need to do to get you into Grandmasters. Before we dive into anything else, let's start with first one of the most important fundamentals, and that is map knowledge. By the time you reach this rank, you should already have a very strong understanding of all the maps in the rotation, and that's including knowing where the capture points are, where each team spawns, and the most common routes taken, and also good flanks for those routes. Now, if you are still unsure about any of these details, I highly recommend you jumping back into a practice match or quick play to memorize these key locations. Additionally, start paying attention to destructible areas. Know where they are and when it's an advantage to break them and open them up, which leads us nicely into my tip number 2, and that is good positioning. So with destructible environments, you need to focus on good positioning, and this is why map knowledge is so important. A great example of this is from this clip that you'll see right now, and I was playing Moon Knight, but I was able to break the wall on the second floor of Frozen Airfield in Domination, and simply just throw my Ankh down and pick off the enemy buck as he was coming out of spawn. Additionally, I was able to distract their tanks as well with this tactic, just eating up some game time, allowing them not to get to point. It's simple things like this that allowed me to get an easy elimination, but also buying time and being a distraction, all the while in a relatively protective area, which gave me good sight lines, but it was hard for them to target me. Other than this example, you want to focus on good positioning, and this goes for any role. Now, if you're on tank, you don't want to be taking all the damage unnecessarily. You want to be in a good position for yourself, in good angles to get the damage off, but also maybe be able to cover your team. And then things like standing in a doorway or having a wall by you so you can fall back and get cover and heals. Now, if you're on DPS, you might want to do something similar to the tanks, but you can use the tanks as your cover, or you can be trying to play an off angle that has a good sight line to do damage, but just be sure that you have a good escape to fall back to your team, or you're near a health pack that you can rely on. Lastly, for you healers out there, you want to avoid being seen by the enemy as much as possible. Once they know where you are, they're going to try to get you, so you want to have good positioning and good vision on your own team, but still out of the sight line of the enemy team. But also, like the DPS, you do want to have a good escape ability if needed in case the enemy does push you. Now, as I just mentioned, you want to be playing around health packs as much as possible because this eases the effort that your healers need to do and allows them to focus on other people throughout the map, whether that's, helping with the tanks or even helping damage the enemies. Now, if you are struggling with good positioning, there are countless guides out there focusing on this topic alone, so be sure to look those up. Tip number 3 is team fights. Now, team fights are the heartbeat of this game, and especially goes for diamond rank. You want to think of your life as a critical resource in your team, and a single death can cost your team either excessive time waste or even the objective, so always value your life. With this info going in as a team and not charging in solo or trickling in every time you spawn are simple things you can do to avoid and help your team out in this sense. Additionally to this, you can coordinate your ultimates, target low health enemies, and even calling out enemies to focus on are other ways that you can help in team fights. Awareness and timing make all the difference in this rank. For tip number 4, just as I had stated previously, to avoid making simple mistakes and really being more aware, you need to stay alert to see if the enemy slips up and makes mistakes instead. Examples of this are if someone rushes in without a team, making that easy elimination. Something else to watch out for is if enemies panic and use their ultimates, or just use them poorly in general. If this happens, sometimes it's best to hold on to your team's ultimate to use until you can get into a better position, or use it in a better timing. Last, look for enemies in bad positions. This could be something like enemies trying to come through a doorway and just having your team's Groot wall them off and trap them with your team for an easy elimination. It's simple things like this that you should be constantly on the lookout for. This tip really just focuses on being aware of opportunities when they present themselves and capitalizing on them when they do. Beyond punishing mistakes, you also need to counter enemy characters, abilities, and positions. All of this you should have picked up along the way as you've climbed throughout your previous ranks. But let's first talk about your characters. Now, Now, you want to have a good understanding of counters at this rank because that's going to include things like Wolverine versus Groot, Namor versus a diver or flyer. These are simple examples, but there are plenty of different combos out there that can counter each and every character out there. So just be aware of them when you come across them. And now the next part of this is positioning. Now, I know we just talked about this, but if the enemy is in a good spot and hard to get to, you should be trying to use off angles to counter this. Additionally, making swaps to different characters like a Squirrel Girl or something like that can be a viable option to kind of bounce things off walls and kind of force the enemy out of their own position. And the last part of this is the ability counters. A great example of this is the Doctor Strange portal. Now, I know I've used this before, but you can simply just stun or web him basically to waste this ability for him and force him into that long cooldown where he cannot use his portal again. Another example of this would be gameplay of me playing on Groot. Now, I failed to realize that I should have played this more closely to this jump pad right here, and you see me get kind of walled off constantly with this other Groot. Now, if I had used the jump pad, I could have used it to get up to a higher position and had better angles on the enemy Groot, all while staying a little bit more safe away from his own walls. So it's simple things like this in your mindset that you have to kind of play around. For tip number 6, let's change over to communication, and whether it's voice chat, typing, or using the communication wheel, communicate. Even small callouts go an extremely long way. Now, one of my favorite methods is the group up from the ping wheel, and it's a simple way to signal a reset if your team is getting staggered because it just kind of alerts them and knows, oh, maybe we should fall back and kind of regroup. Additionally, you can use the ping wheel for the attack here alert, and I like to use this when I hear audio cues like enemy footsteps maybe after the remnants of a fight and someone's trying to sneak away to just alert my team to go hunt them down. Now, up next for tip number 7, since we have just recently talked about pinging enemies when you hear audio cues, I want to go a little bit deeper into those audio and visual cues. Now, first off, I want to mention that I am currently using the immersion preset in the audio mix to hear footsteps better, and it has really actually helped quite a bit. Now, this does help with also with hearing the abilities as well from further away, and those abilities are things like Punisher ult or even Star-Lord's ultimate as well. Additionally, with audio cues, there are plenty of visual ones in the game to watch out for, and the best and easy examples that I can say are something like Namor or Jeff ultimates, as they paste a large visual circle on the ground that you can try to avoid. Other characters have similar abilities that you just kind of pick up and know that they're coming, so it's just something that more time that you play in the game, the more easily you'll get to notice these audio and visual cues that you can take advantage of. Now, on to tip number 8, and this might sound a little bit redundant, and if you have been following my previous guides, but learning to master all characters you play is vital going forward. But I do want to take it one step further this time, and since you should be comfortable with these characters, you should also be learning how to continue to play them against your enemy's counters. And I know we have just talked about this, that you should be aware of counters, but a great example of this would be, again, Groot against a Wolverine or a Bucky player that can easily snag Groot away from his walls and his team. Learning how to play against this can really elevate your gameplay to another level. Be sure to find specific guides out there if you are having some trouble dealing with these counters, and don't be afraid to review your footage still to see if what you might be doing wrong in previous games, and think about how you could have played those situations a little bit better. Now, I have talked about push and pull in the past, but for tip number 9, I want to discuss a little bit more of when to play aggressive and when to play passively. First and foremost, do not be taking risky fights when you can help it. It never pays to run directly at the enemy just to get eliminated and be forced to wait and spawn again before you can get back into the fight. You can play aggressively when you've got the angle or the numbers advantage on your team. And even as a healer, throwing a bit extra damage can help swing the tide of a fight. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, you don't want to be feeding the enemy team, so giving them free ult charge is not really ideal. So this is where playing passively is a little bit more interesting, because you don't want to be running into the enemy teams that are entrenched into a really good defense unless you have to, or if you have your team with you. So with this, things like sitting aside and waiting for your team for 10 or 20 seconds just to get back from spawn is vital. It's not you throwing the game. Additionally, if you are struggling to push anywhere and you're just kind of in this stagnant fight, waiting and passively playing until someone on your team has an ultimate is also a great approach, because with this ultimate you can make that final push into either the point or just past the enemy in general. Now, up for tip number 10, and you've made it to Diamond, so you finally get to use that ban system. Now, I do know this is going to change in season 2 with Gold finally coming in and getting the ban system as as well. But with this system, you want to avoid using the meta bans. Just because others have told you what you should ban doesn't really mean that's what you need to do. What you really want to focus on is bans that benefit your team composition instead. For example, if you're playing Star-Lord or a Human Torch, you might want to focus on the ban of taking out Namor instead, because he can be a real problem to deal with. Now, you also want to pay attention to what the other team is banning as well, and this can easily tell you what they might want to be running against your team. So it takes time to pick up on these like tiny little cues, but once you learn this trick can be extremely beneficial. On to tip number 11, and that is going to be being open to fill. Now, it's good to know at this rank, but being a one trick can really hurt your team. So being open to filling other roles when needed. With the bans in place, some players lose access to their mains, and if you're versatile, you can kind of step up and help your team with a solid composition instead, because there's going to be those players that say, I don't know how to play anything else. So just being able to flex around, as we have taught you throughout the other previous ranks, is going to be highly beneficial at this rank. Now for my last tip, on tip number 12, and it's just keep grinding. Even if you are struggling, playing against strong opponents is one of the best ways to improve your skills and game sense. Some may think making an additional account when it's hard, at their current rank, and just going to the lower ranks is better, but you're not going to learn as much when you're playing against these lower ranked characters. Yes, it can be frustrating getting stomped, but if you treat each loss as a lesson, you'll be shocked at how quickly you can grow. Alright, that wraps up my top tips for climbing to Diamond, and hopefully this helped you get better understanding of what it takes to progress into Grandmasters. If you learned something new or just enjoyed the video, drop a like, it really helps out the channel. And hey, if you got your own tips or questions, throw them in the comments. I love learning additional tips or just helping out where I can. And don't forget to subscribe if you want more guides like this, breakdowns, or gameplay content. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.